Hi everyone, this is Jebasingh, the Director of Officers IAS Academy. Now, for this session, the topic is going to be media civil servant relationship. A very, very important topic. Media and civil servants are like inseparable twins. While we are preparing for civil service exam, we are heavily dependent on media for the current affairs questions. Once we succeed, again media posts us in first page and second page as a successful IAS or IPS officer. After that, when you get into service, right from day one till the last day or even post-retirement, the media civil servant relationship will be like love-hate relationship. It is inseparable. So we thought we'll include this topic, media civil servant, for this civil service day. And so we thought of bringing a distinguished guest who has spent almost 2 decades in journalism. The guest for today is Mr. Sam Daniel, who's the Bureau Chief, NDTV. Mr. Sam Daniel is a product of the prestigious Madras Christian College. After that, for a brief tenure of 4 years, he was working as a professor in Kodaikanal Christian College. His call for serving the nation came in 2000 and he joined NDTV so that he could join the 4th pillar of our democracy. For last 2 decades, he is with NDTV under different capacities. Mr. Sam Daniel is a household name. Mr. Sam Daniel is known for his ethical journalism and also fearless journalism. He has taken up so many social causes, and because of that, many helpless people have got benefited. So it's a pleasure to have him, and he has also won several awards like Leadership Excellence Award for the electronic journalism in the year 2015. So it's a pleasure to have Mr. Sam Daniel with us. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jebasingh. It's a joy to talk to you and to your team of members and your students, prospective bureaucrats on this special day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us, sir. First thing I want to know is, sir, as a journalist, what gives you the maximum satisfaction, sir?
I think the biggest joy of being a journalist is the fact that I try to tell the truth. We live in an information explosion era where everybody consumes news in a different way. You get so much of information on your WhatsApp, on your Facebook, Twitter, and so many other formats on television, through mobile phones and websites. But as a mainstream journalist, the biggest joy I get when I tell the story is the joy of investigating something and telling the truth. The kind of information explosion we have, almost 95% of what we receive on social media could be unverified, inaccurate. And our job as serious journalists is to tell the truth, to help the public to get the truth in that sense. And that's something, it's a laborious process, and the more you dig deeper, the more you get a different level of truth. And second joy is, of course, to participate in the role of molding public opinion. Our job is not to mold public opinion, but unconsciously, as a byproduct perhaps, over the years, your reporting also helps people to get a sense of, you help people to judge for themselves what's right, what's wrong, get a perspective, a clear perspective on various subjects, which otherwise they may not be able to clearly distinguish themselves. So the media's job is also to help people understand things in a better way, be it a class 5 student, be it an IAS aspirant, be it a PhD scholar. We make sure what we tell is understood by everyone, and help them in that sense to develop a stand, develop a perspective, develop a clear understanding on various issues. And of course, the third joy is sometimes you also help the cause of justice. You also help the cause of finding a solution for perhaps your problem, which was not attended by the government for many years. So you mount that pressure at some level. You embarrass the government sometimes. You ask tough questions to the government sometimes over their alleged lapses, and that way, sometimes your reports, your stories also provide or help the common man get solution from the government. And that's something, again, when you get a call from somebody on who you had done a story from a community member, that after your story the government has intervened, you have got some relief, and that's something makes your day. You feel happy that your job also helps you to make a difference for communities who are helpless, to be the voice of the voiceless, which is the true function of a journalist.
Oh, happy to know, sir. Now, you are one who is almost 20 years. Most of the viewers here wouldn't have even born when you started your journalist career. In fact, I heard that you were the first to go and report from the ground zero when the tsunami struck in 2004. In this 20 years, so many issues you would have covered. Still, I want to know which one, according to you, had the biggest impact?
I think we can list several stories, but a few stories stand out over the years, and people recollect those reports, those stories even today after so many years. One could be, of course, my tsunami coverage. People still tell me that they watched us on NDTV, and they were getting updates which I gave those days as I traveled from Salem towards Nagapattinam, which ultimately turned into the ground zero or epicenter for tsunami in India. And to give you a little background, it was during my Christmas vacation that tsunami struck. I was with my parents in my hometown in Salem, and we have a strict policy: when someone is on leave, the company doesn't disturb them at all. And as we got back from church that day, I was watching local television in Salem, and this report of exact Tamil name used by channels at that point was Peralai. There was no tsunami known at that point in time. And I called my boss, Jennifer Arul, who was the bureau chief at that time. She said, "Sam, you're on leave, just keep quiet." She slammed the phone. Then I made 2-3 calls after understanding the gravity of the situation. Then I was asked to go to Nagapattinam to cover. I didn't have a car because I was on my vacation, so I hired a cab immediately. And my colleague, the camera person Chandran, was in Madurai, so I asked him to take his car, and come towards Nagapattinam. So we both were traveling from different cities, and I was constantly in touch with the senior police officers, the IG at that point in time for the Tiruchi range. It was Mr. George, who later became the Chennai police commissioner. So I was in touch with him, the local police, to get a sense of what is happening, the casualties, number of people who have died, and then the kind of impact in terms of hundreds of people leaving Nagapattinam, leaving outside, living and getting to other districts around, and the kind of relief work being done. So that update, we didn't have WhatsApp those days. We didn't have high-speed internet on our phone those days. It was a simple, ordinary Nokia phone. And I was able to report that even as we were driving towards Nagapattinam. And that something gave that crucial piece of information for public who are waiting for authentic information. And that's something which I still cherish. And we were there for a week on the ground telling stories of the tragedy. And at one point in time, we went to an area where we saw scores of bodies lying unattended the day after. And we immediately reported on that. And then within half an hour, a battery of police personnel came. And the whole week, we were not only covering the way the tragedy unfolded, but we were also telling stories of hope. For example, I remember 2 brothers who were having a simple, ordinary rowboat. And they used that boat to transport hundreds of people by making several trips. Those were stranded from one side to take them safely to the other side, risking their own lives in that point of situation. So stories of hope, how different communities came to help them. We didn't have this kind of social media at that point in time, but still people were very generously helping, truckloads of relief material coming there. And then how the local authorities were also helping. For example, there were parents who lost their children completely. There were mothers who had underwent family planning surgeries, which means they cannot have children. And at that point in time, the officials tried to see whether they can reverse the whole procedure so that it will give such parents an opportunity to have children again. So all those unimaginable stories of tragedy, stories of hope, and that was something which I still remember, one of the biggest stories which we had done. And then we also, over the years, we covered tsunami, how the city has been rebuilt, how people have been rehabilitated, hundreds of thousands of houses built, how fishermen have been given new boats, how self-help group women in those groups have been given a new vacation, like that, how the whole Nagapattinam was rebuilt. That's something still I feel very special. Secondly, there are many simple stories. One thing that I always remember is a small hamlet in Ramanathapuram district of Tamil Nadu. I heard about that village not having power supply even after 60 years of independence. We traveled there and we could not believe people had put up lanterns hanging on the trees into the village so that at night time they will light up those lanterns. They will burn and provide light for the village just like street lights. And imagine 60 years after independence, in Ramanathapuram, we have a village which didn't have power supply. And we had done a story how people struggle there, how children struggle to study there. They still use kerosene lamps. And after that story, we got a call after 2 weeks saying that they got power supply after the story was done. So these are stories which give you hope. And then there are stories also which provide justice for families. Lastly, which I can share with you was the story of a senior, an official from RAW, Research Analysis Wing. And to make the story, long story short, there was some issue with his boss. He was wrongfully, illegally sacked from job for a long time. And that had a huge impact on the family. The children could not get enough money to get good education. The family's livelihood was lost, and he was battling. He was fighting a legal case, and we told the story how the kind of impact it has had on the family, and it appeared that he was wrongfully penalized for no fault of his, and it was a difficult story because the senior officers who we had to ask why they have done this, they were all in Delhi. And at that point in time, we had Mr. Narayan Swamy, who was the then minister in the Prime Minister's office. And I caught hold of him at the airport when he came back from Delhi on a particular day, explained it to him, and he gave me an interview on record saying that the government will look at that. If something wrong had been done, we will set it right. And the story was telecast. We had done 2 stories over a period of time. And then one fine morning, this gentleman calls me and tells, "Sir, thank you very much. I have been taken back into service." He has joined. And this is again, uh, it's not every day you get stories like this, but when you do, you help in the cause of justice. You become the voice of the voiceless people. And these again make you feel happy about the kind of work we do. And I think these 3 would stand out always. But otherwise, I always have a special interest for ordinary stories. Say, for example, the media largely is also being criticized for reporting only on the scams, on the negative side of life. But I have a passion to tell stories of inspiration, stories of courage, stories which could motivate other people. And over the last 20 years, I've done hundreds of such stories, which I feel that's also the responsibility of journalists to tell stories of hope so that people also can draw inspiration from those stories. And one story I always love about is this 5 years ago, there's a kind of a community fridge in Besant Nagar in Chennai. This was started by a dentist, a lady dentist, and she has set up this called, I think in Tamil it's called, I don't remember the name. It works like this. Anybody having excess food at home, you can keep your food there in the fridge. And anybody who's hungry walking through that road, you can just open the fridge and take the food. I thought it's such a graceful thing because you feed the hungry people without making them lose their dignity, without making them go and stand in line asking someone, begging someone for food. right, Royal, you may be a rich man, you may be a middle class person. If you think you need some water, you can open the fridge. If you think you need some bread, you can open it. If you need some cool drinks, you can. So I thought that's a beautiful story, and I had done that. So these are stories which could again motivate people. It's called Annamitubun. I remember the name now. So
Hmm.
that kind of those kind of stories I love, and now also we have the advantage of writing about them on a website. So even if you don't have space on TV, you can write about them on a website. Last story I remember, again, this is a story of a came through a friend who said his office peon, his daughter, a brilliant student who studies 11th standard, was suffering from blood cancer. And at that point in time, stem cell therapy was offering a cure. And for that, they said it would cost them 30 lakh rupees. They had no money. They had borrowed, pledged all the gold they had in their family, but still they required so much of money. At that time, there was some breaking news going on television, so we could not do a television story. But since this internet website on a site was available, I told them if you can make the girl make an appeal in English, you can use your mobile phone, make the recording, and send it to me. I'll try to use that on a website. And that story struck a chord with people. Some 40 lakh rupees came in the form of donations, people who read the story, people who watched that girl appeal for help. She's a daughter of an ordinary peon, but she spoke so beautifully how she wants this help to get her, to give her a chance to live, and that help poured in. To make it short, she ultimately died. They were able to do the surgery, but she could not survive. And the family still had some 20 lakhs left with him. After 3 or 4 months, there was another call from another family who had read about this girl's story, and they were asking, "Sir, can you do something for us?" And I know this particular family had received so much of money, but they didn't spend that because she ultimately died. And I called them. There is another case coming like this. Would you want to help them? They immediately said, "Sir, we have some 7 lakhs loan to be paid. We can pay that money. We can give you whatever money we have." So you won't believe they came forward to give the entire balance money left, I think around 10 or 11 lakhs to this person. And this person also, this family, again, a poor driver's son, they were able to use this money. Both children died, but our story gave them the satisfaction that because of lack of money, they denied their children the opportunity to live, the treatment, the option of treatment. Now they have the satisfaction. Yes, we did our best, but now still our child could not be saved. So these are stories again which give that human element, which have a strong human element, which gives us that kind of joy and satisfaction that we do something that helps the community we serve at large.
Oh, you have lot of experiences and you have helped a lot through your journalism. Happy to know, sir. One thing I want to know, sir, this civil servant media relationship. When we are in, say, when I was in Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, where the IAS officers are trained or other civil servants also, we have a special module on media, how to handle media. Now, from a journalist point of view, how do you feel? How the relationship should be between media and civil service or civil servants?
Well, that's a very subjective issue. Every individual, every bureaucrat, every civil servant can have his or her own perspective on this, how to deal with that. But I'll tell you the kind of different styles adopted by different officers over the last 20 years. There are officers who are very media savvy in that sense. You can call them at any point in time. They will give you the figures. Even if they don't have it immediately, they will run that extra mile to give you the right information because they understand it's important. The media is given the right, accurate information so that it sends the right message. This is one kind of officers. When you watch your television every day, you would see certain officers like that who appear on TV, who take questions, who take the trouble to explain things in every possible way so that when journalists ask those questions on behalf of people, they understand the importance of clarifying them so that the people who read, who watch those interviews will be benefited. There is another group of officers who operate in a different way. They would give you all kinds of information, accurate information, but they would not want to be quoted. They would not want to be interviewed on camera. But when there is a crisis, say for example, if there is a huge a scam, somebody has been arrested, and I need to flash that news. So if you ask that officer, he or she will give all the information I want, but they would not allow me to quote his or her name. They would not want me to come and interview them face to face on TV. But from a journalist point of view, I can trust them. They would give me accurate information. They would give me quick. They understand the importance, the way the contemporary, the modern news work, and they give you immediately. And that, as a journalist, helps me very much because need not speculate. I need not report something which is yet to be confirmed, which is not accurate. But here is some officer, when I call, he or she will immediately give me the information. So I report saying a senior officer told me like this. So that solves the purpose of journalists. But people who read that would not know who is that information from. But over a period of time, if I'm talking about a senior officer, a police officer in Chennai, people would know who could that person be. People who are following news will understand who is that person. Third set of officers are very selective in their approach. They would use media, they would be friendly towards the media when they have something to offer. Maybe they have launched a new scheme, maybe they have launched a new app, maybe they have something to tell, and they would use media at that point in time alone, so that would put them in limelight. It could be, you can call it as self-promotion, you can call it as a kind of a selective approach to use media when it benefits you, and otherwise when you call them for any other issues, any other information, they won't answer your call, they won't respond to your messages, they won't even come and brief media. That's one style people follow. Another style of officers, they would have their own favorite media houses, or they would have their own favorite journalists, individual journalists. It could be for various reasons. They would know he or she would not misquote them. They would know he or she would not ask inconvenient questions. They would know he or she would not manipulate, may not twist the facts he or she is giving. And over the years, they may have their own reasons why they are very selective in their approach. So if an officer who is open to me may not be open to another journalist, and it's vice versa. And that, again, over the years, it depends on the kind of a rapport a journalist fills with a team of officers and the kind of credibility you enjoy. And that's, again, a different. We can't blame anyone for any of these different approaches they have, but that's how they. But there are also challenges. The media, say for example, 20 years ago, every district or every city may have hardly 5 or 6 journalists. If you take English newspapers, hardly 1 or 2. If you take Tamil newspapers, a few handful, and that's it. Maybe a handful of magazines, fortnightly magazines or weekly magazines. But now, if you say every district will have at least 100 journalists, you have at least half a dozen national channels, you have at least more than half a dozen Tamil channels, you have close to 100 active news portals on websites. So it's very difficult for each of these people to be answered when they call by any of these officers. It's very difficult. So that's also a ground reality that they have to be selective. They cannot physically be able to answer everyone's call. And in this kind of situation, it works. A police officer dealing with crime may prefer a few reporters who specialize in crime. A bureaucrat who deals with various policies may prefer a few senior journalists who understand the nuances of a particular policy, who can report in a very mature way. And other calls they will not answer. So there are various styles adopted by various people. And it's also true that in states like Tamil Nadu, regional media, also across the country, national media, they're also being seen as polarized politically. One particular channel can be seen to be run by the ruling party. One particular channel can be seen to be representing the opposition party, like that. So they are very cautious. They wouldn't want to be misquoted. They wouldn't want to be used in this kind of a tussle among channels, which in a way function as the voice of their own respective parties. So authorities ought to be certainly guarded when you have situations like this. Sometimes they speak for the channel run by the ruling party for various reasons. But these are the challenges again these officials face when. But one healthy tradition I would see is that there are some officers who set up mechanisms in place for a free flow of information. Whether I'm the collector, I'm the commissioner now or not, they consciously put in systems in place so that now, for example, you have every department, every police commissioner, every SP form their own WhatsApp groups so that every arrest being made, every investigation, every key developments are being communicated in a routine way to all the journalists. So that's a good thing, welcome thing, because there is no scarcity of information. There is no restriction of dissemination of news from various departments to media houses. But there is a danger. Say, for example, earlier they used to have press meetings regularly. The chief minister will have press meets. The prime minister may have ministers, be it central ministers or state ministers, may have regular press briefings where the officials or the ministers would regularly subject themselves to one form of democratic scrutiny in the form of questions put by journalists. But now that culture is coming down, right from the prime minister to the chief ministers in different states to senior bureaucrats in different states. They are very active on social media. They communicate information, they put everything on Twitter, they put everything on Facebook. So what is happening is being told instantly. But there could be corruption cases, there could be irregularities, there could be lapses, there could be shortcomings, there could be many questions to be explained, which could actually be the voice of the people. But they are not willing to have an interaction with the press. To the outside world, they project that, come on, we have a prime minister who is putting everything on Twitter, who reacts everything every time on Twitter. We have a chief minister who is very active on social media. But cleverly, they stay away from getting scrutinized. They stay away from being in a position where they may have to answer. They completely cleverly avoid from situations where journalists can ask questions. And that is very a dangerous thing that could lead to autocratic situations, that could lead to arrogant situations, that could actually defy the democratic principles every one of us are trying to work towards, to make sure that the answers public have will be put to them. They would give those, the questions public would have would be put to them. Because we as journalists, we don't have any vested interest normally, unless you are attached to a media house which has some political agenda. But otherwise, we represent the public. As a responsible bureaucrat, if officers and aspirants understand this, the journalists are none, but they are actually a sample of the voice of the people in that town or in that country. If you understand that and do everything possible, before I became an officer, as an ordinary citizen, what are the difficulties I had? What kind of challenges I had to know about a few scholarships, to know about few schemes, to know about methods of application to apply for a scholarship? What are the openings available for various students? Like that. Put yourself in the shoes of an ordinary citizen. See whether your job is making avenues open to give answers to those questions. It can be using technology. It can be using interviews by journalists or giving interviews for journalists. Anyway, but make sure there is a healthy give and take. There is a healthy, reasonable opportunity for healthy interaction, so that could benefit the larger community you as officers and we as journalists are trying to serve. If you can strike a balance to make sure the information required by the ordinary citizen of the country is provided, and I think in that sense, you have every right to deny an interview, you have every right to clarify, you have every right to put your point of view, but make it a two-way process than making it appear to be one way. And with all the technology, it's very easy to be that kind of a a one-way kind of playing a one-way kind of role, but that's not the democratic norm we expect from the country, particularly with those who occupy positions of power, be it at the political level or at the bureaucratic level.
Oh, you explained very nicely different aspects, and in fact, you told about the voluntary information also. There are some negatives. In fact, it's a learning for me also. I also see, yes, voluntarily they are giving, but still, yes, they are not being cross-questioned. Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, now, if someone, very honest, one civil servant enters the service which, to serve the nation and then enters, he becomes a civil servant. He wants to have a healthy media relationship, and he doesn't no vested interest with it. Very honest man. Now, what type of style he should adopt or she should adopt according to you? Because you have given me 4 different styles. Which is the best style from the civil servant point of view as well as media point of view also?
Right. I think to begin with, maybe a collector or an ASP who is in charge of a district, they can start having a weekly press conference. For instance, if you look at the British model, the Prime Minister is open for questions every Wednesday in the Parliament. Likewise, every officer can have can put in a structure, a mechanism that he or she would be available for questions to be taken on particular day. It could be the norm. But there are times when there could be crises like floods, earthquakes, there could be crises like a bomb blast, there could be crises like the pandemic we are witnessing now, where there could be requests from the media at any point in time. Say, for example, there was a report that one minister was found positive. Now, the government will not tell that as an official information. So, if you have to ask someone, it could be the late in the evening. So, these could be the exceptions when people communicate with you on odd days or hours. But otherwise, if there is a system, then journalists at least can wait for that day. For example, earlier when I used to be in the districts, we have had collectors who used to have press meets once in a while. I think once in a month we used to have a press meet. So what I used to do is that I used to list all the stories which I have in mind over the next 1 week or 2 weeks. And if those stories require a government response, I will use these opportunities. On a lighter note, we call it as strip them in public, because otherwise they won't be available. I mean, I'm telling you in a very jovial way, the parlance used in journalists. But what I'm trying to say is that these are opportunities for them, which you provide to raise those issues. It can be about situation in a village. It can be about unemployment. It can be about the civil work going on there, or it could be about drinking water scarcity. It could be about sewage facility in a particular city or a country. So at least there is a mechanism that the collector or the commissioner is not shirking away the responsibilities, but you have a formal setup where he would also come prepared and you also go prepared with what you need, and there is a healthy interaction. The collector gets time to promote his or her maybe special schemes or projects, and journalists also, whatever doubts, questions, clarifications they need, they get that. Second one, in the modern era, of course, we have WhatsApp groups. You need not make it into an open thing, but at least in your city, you can have members in your city, in your town. Or if you're in a city like Chennai, you can have a larger group of journalists who cover your beat or who report on issues like that. It can be interactive. There are people, officers who are very gentlemanly, who say, I give you all the information, but don't quote me. But it helps us at least to report accurately. That is also perfectly fine. And then at every level, now technology can be used. Say, for example, we have the pandemic. You have fever clinics today. Now, if the Chennai Corporation can put this information at least 1 or 2 days earlier on their Twitter page, there is going to be a fever clinic now in Raipuram on this day, at Perungudi on this day. So people would also make it a point to check those websites or this Twitter handle regular. So would be journalists. So again, what we call as frequently asked questions can all be put there. What is the, for example, even now in Chennai, for instance, no family would know what should be done if someone is testing positive for corona. Should they themselves go to the hospital to get admitted, or should they call the corona helpline? They would centrally allot a hospital or a corona care center. So if you put all these questions with brief answers on your Facebook page, it solves lots of problems. Journalists also will not trouble you. They may trouble you if they still need clarifications. So that's what I'm saying. Put yourself in the shoes of an ordinary member of the public. You're trying to serve, and put all the information, and then that will become the norm. At every level you would want to improve it, at every level you want to fine tune it, and that becomes an easy kind of thing. But otherwise, whatever you say, journalists only play a very minor role in the work of a bureaucrat. It's not that every day 24 hours they deal with journalists. No, in terms of the large population they serve, in terms of a wide range of work they do, the role, interaction, time spent with journalists will be very, very less. And it's not a big thing. So if they have this kind of a genuine interest, automatically you can tweak all those different ways I told you, or you can be innovative how to reach out. And now, fortunately, as I told you, the culture is changing among the present day bureaucrats. Most of them are young, in their 40s. They become very tech savvy. But again, there is a problem. In Tamil Nadu, for instance, AIADMK government, till Ms. Jayalalitha was there, she never gave officials a free hand to address the media, nor the ministers. So even though individual ministers or individual bureaucrats, civil servants, officers would want to interact with the media, that would always be at that time, those 5 years, in an informal level, on the basis of mutual trust. They will never give a formal interview. They will never give a quote for newspaper journalists to quote them. Always they will say a senior officer told us, a senior officer who did not want to be named told us, like that. But when DMK is in power, there was a different culture. Journalists could walk in, the chief minister would have frequent press meets. We could stop him at the party office, or if he goes to some other public function, we can stop him to get his reactions. And he liked it, and he encouraged that. And that's one style of, and then that also was passing on to the ministers and the bureaucrats and the police across the state. So according to the regime also, the officers' style of interaction with the media changes. Now, for instance, the AIADMK government has changed a lot. The party has appointed spokespersons. Ministers are largely available for interactions. Chief Minister, he hasn't called for a press meet as such, but he can be questioned when he addresses at airports or at his hometown or places like that. So that, compared to the way it used to be earlier, things are changing. But still, as I told you, all these are largely towards conveying what they want to convey, but not answering what the public would want to know. If that can also be taken into account, if the chief minister, if the senior bureaucrats can make sure they would also allow interaction, then there would be more transparency, there would be more good governance, and that could actually serve the cause of the media and the civil servants who are trying to cater or serve the citizens at large.
Sir, the next part I want to know is, see, I was working in a Naxal affected district in West Bengal. So that time, many a times, I used to get in advance some news because media is omnipresent, unlike the government officials. Every village, some sources will be there and journalists immediately get that information. So many a times, in advance, we prepare for the counter also before it gets reported. So from many civil service aspirants are watching this, when they enter into service, how positively they can use media, not for their personal benefit, but for the public use, how positively they can use.
I think a few officers, even now, they use this approach. They, again, the magic is you have to establish that kind of a rapport. You have to establish that kind of a culture that your aim is to bring about a change and that you need cooperation. As long as officers don't shy away from questions, I think that's as long as you stand for truth, you don't try to cover up, you don't try to use media for a selfish agenda. I think media is also largely very cooperative. Of course, the media's role is to be a watchdog, but media's role, as I told you, is also to tell many good stories, to bring about changes, to reach out to the common man, to bring about a qualitative improvement in our democracy, to reach out, to ensure that the government's benefits are reached to the common. So I think it's all how the individual officers try to establish a rapport. I can give you many examples without giving names of officers who use media in a very remarkable way. But one thing that works well for them is we know that what they say is authentic information. They don't take us for a ride. And once that kind of a confidence is established, then be it good news, be it critical news, they know that you're approachable for both. And it becomes easier to operate. As I told you, you would be surprised. There are also another breed of officers who are very particular about the cause of democracy, who are very particular about the need to be transparent, who are very particular about even exposing the wrongdoings in their own departments or governments. They may not, they also in a way act as whistleblowers. They may give some information to trusted journalists. See, this is what is happening. Something is going wrong. This needs to be highlighted in the media so that the chief minister, the government at large, the senior officers would know about this and we can be rectified. It's not because of vendetta or personal politics with another officer. No, they're truly concerned that we have to clean up the system. They're truly concerned that in areas where they serve, things ought to be improved, but that could be not within their control. But they at least have that sense of sincerity that they share that information sometimes. Nobody would know who gave the information, but good, correct. And of course, the journalists would do their due diligence in terms of even verifying what he or she tells. But what I'm trying to say is that there are also such good officers who are not concerned about just about their own personal promotion, going beyond the call of duty. They also want to improve things in areas where they serve, so that this kind of reports, this kind of call it exposés or call it critical reporting, call it reports that could question the role of the government or question the lapses. The larger purpose they are trying to fulfill is, will things improve? That's also very important. But what I'm trying to say is that as long as an officer is honest, trustworthy, truthful, over a period, you would know well journalists who can be trusted. Journalists would know very well who are the officers who are trustworthy, who are really trying to work for improving the situation, like that. Say, for example, when I was a young fledgling reporter 20 years back, the officers who were collectors, commissioners in smaller towns, they all have become additional secretaries, DGP, chief secretaries, level officers, and we all have grown together. So if you see, whichever department, there must be some officer who you know very well. Likewise, they also would have seen my reports over the last 20 years. They would have also seen reports by various other journalists, be it print journalists, be it on the TV, be it on the web. So they also have a good assessment of your report. They know who is credible, who exploits, who manipulates, who exaggerates, who is very fair. So it works both ways. Like we look for journalists, officers who are free to give information, who are free to give ideas, because we also need stories. We also need good, positive as well as critical stories to report to be good journalists. So it works both ways. But what I would not approve is officers should never become partners in crime with journalists. That's very important. You maintain a very professional, thoroughly professional relationship, but not a personal friend. In my 20 years of experience, I've never met an officer or a police officer or a bureaucrat in response to a personal invitation for a dinner or a lunch or for a drink. No, I maintain we're all professional friends. There is nothing personal. They also know Sam can be doing positive stories, he can also be critical, but of course I will be critical not without giving you a chance to explain that. That's something very, very important, both as a journalist and as a civil servant. When journalists have questions, if you explain, then half the battle is won. You're able to only when there are attempts by governments, officers, or a system from the ruling dispensation to cover it up, to make things look as if everything is fine when the truth is not otherwise, then you get into such negative publicity. Because in this era of social media, in this era of information explosion, nothing can be hidden, actually, technically speaking. But officers need not take a bad situation in their area to be a reflection of his or her bad governance. No, it's not that way. In a police officer, however strict he or she is, cannot control a family murder in a fit of anger. It's not a reflection of your, no, the reflection of your good governance is that, are you able to arrest that person? Are you able to immediately order a probe? Have you done your due diligence to make sure the person is booked, brought to justice? Nobody is going to blame you of inefficiency for things which are not in your control. Likewise, there could be shortcomings in the way food is being served in noon meal centers, hygiene factor in government hospitals. Yes, that's one difference we find in different states. For example, if you go to Andhra and Kerala, bureaucrats are very, very open-handed. They don't mind their shortcomings in their departments getting exposed, because they know that helps them to put pressure indirectly on the government to fix it. Whereas in Tamil Nadu, the culture is generally to cover it up. It does show so much of harm for the state. Say, for example, I'll give you one short example. During drought, there were situations where in Delta region in Tamil Nadu, many farmers have committed suicide. Be it the police there, be it the government there, they will try to project these suicides because of some personal problem. They may say he had some issue with his wife. They say he had some health issue. They say he had some other issue. They would not acknowledge the fact that the drought, the farmer was under drought. He had no money to buy pesticides. He was tortured, troubled by money lenders, private money lenders. They won't do that. So for us to report what we know as factual position becomes difficult to be reported, because the government is maintaining a different picture. Whereas, but still we report. But what I'm saying is that if the government tells the truth, then it mounts pressure on the central government to frame a better policy for the welfare of the farmers. It helps in different ways to improve the quality of farmers. But when you cover it up, you are unconsciously trying to project as if everything is honky-dory, and you're trying to stop what could be a reformation in the farming sector. Whereas if you go to Kerala or Andhra, it can be during drought, it can be during farmer suicide, it can be during cyclone. They are open to help us report what is factual. They will tell us, go there, there is major damage. Go there, there is a huge loss. So we are able to report that very accurately, and that helps that particular state to even get more grants from the central government, to help central government also get a sense of the magnitude of the loss. It can be a cyclone, it can be a drought. Whereas when the state government tries to cover it up, why do they try to cover it up? They think that exposing that is a reflection of their bad governance. It can be true, it can not be true, but you are standing in dissemination of truth. Your government, consciously or unconsciously, your officers, consciously or unconsciously, are standing in the way of telling the truth. And that will have its own repercussions, good or bad. So as long as officials are truthful, as long as officials, because if you're away from this guilt consciousness, it's perfectly fine. I would not say you should go out of your way to reach out to journalists. No, nor should we go out of our ways to satisfy or to appease an officer. No, it's not necessary. But there are some situations where people work that way. There are some officers who operate that way. but that's not a professional thing. So my single mantra is, in my experience of dealing with several officers who are open, who are truthful, who are sincere, who are transparent, they are taken seriously. They are able to bring about changes in a much faster way than officers who try to be, maybe trying to cover it up, trying to make everything appear to be fine, that kind of a thing. Of course, if everything is fine, you have every right to say, to explain, to prove that. But when things go wrong, that need not be a reason to think that it's a reflection of your style of governance. No, it doesn't. It need not be that way at all.
Sir, one important highlight which you have made, something important, which is a learning point for whoever wants to serve the country or serving the country, is they should not expect always positive news. There will be negative news, but we should not take it personally, but we should take it as a feedback, so that from the upper end we can get some more help to sort out that issue. But having worked there, we always think only positive news should come. Some negative news, immediately we take it personally, thinking we are honest, why media is blaming. Okay, that is a good learning point for us, sir. Now, one more question.
You raised a valid point. I'll brief it very clearly, sir.
Sir,
criticism is like a double-edged sword. No matter how good you do, still there could be areas where there could be areas to improve. There could be critics who still criticize. But a good officer responds to all those queries, so that when you give a good answer, then you are able to explain that to the people at large. And even a negative story, by giving a good explanation, by giving good proof, by giving a good explanation, you turn that around to your advantage. So I would not say officers should only focus on point. No, nothing. Every query by the media, if you can turn that into an opportunity to explain, to make things clear, to further throw light and tell the truth, then who knows, that could become a good positive story as well. Without naming officers, there are such good officers in Tamil Nadu who serve even now amid this pandemic. They are free to take any questions, but they have answers ready. If they con, if they lie, people would know. People are not that ignorant to blindly believe what you say. But if there is a legitimate challenge, say for example, recently I put this question to an officer about the lack of quality, lack of hygiene in government-run corona care centers. Everybody knows the hygiene factor in these centers compared to private hospitals is very, very bad. But he gave an interesting answer. Sam, tell me, we are dealing with an unprecedented numbers. We have deployed all the sanitary workers available in the corporation, in the hospitals, in these areas. We genuinely face shortage of people who will come to serve in a place where there are positive patients gathered in large numbers. So that's an interesting situation, because if it's a government hospital, a regular hospital, you have people already employed to take care of the sanitation there. But these are colleges, hundreds of schools have become converted into corona care centers, and they manage with limited available manpower to clean. And he also says people from all social strata come there, and they also would not ensure hygiene. They will eat something, put everything there. So it's a combination of various factors. When he explained that, even for me, that was an eye opener, because we are dealing with hundreds of corona care centers where thousands of people are put up there, 17,000 people in Chennai alone, but we don't have a readily available workers to deal with this crisis. So when the officer explained that, the story gave a whole new dimension about the challenges being faced by the government and what's being done to address that. So I think there's nothing negative. Even a negative story can be positively converted, can be turned into a good story if the officer takes time to explain things, instead of thinking it and brushing it aside as a negative story.
Yes, sir. Having worked for few years, I was not for long, but I worked in some sensitive areas. What I could find is, all are not Sam Daniels. There are people who come to us with some vested interest, some journalist asking some personal benefit on some contract and all. If we don't budge, then they become so, they take it so personally, and later every point they ensure that our name gets highlighted for bad things. And same thing, you can easily say that this officer has only done that. Okay, means any lapse in the subdivision or district will be blamed. So if you are coming across such journalists, how a civil servant can deal with? Is there
I
any
think
where we can complain or something like that?
I think if the officer finds a genuine manipulation, wrong reporting by a journalist, he or she has every right to complain to that particular media house. Number one, you can start with reporting that wrong news to that particular reporter. Ask him or her to write a rejoinder, to write an amendment in the next day's newspaper, or if it's a television, you can ask them to do that. If it doesn't work, then you have every right. It's a very easy. You can go to the particular organization's website. Getting the editor's number or email ID is not rocket science. Very simple. You can mail it to them saying that this is a wrong news. We have to address it. We have to change it. And any organization worth its salt, which is credible, which is professional, they would take it seriously. They would do everything possible in every possible way to correct the wrong that has been committed. And you have every right to file a complaint if somebody is blackmailing you, if somebody is using the contact for a wrongful purpose. You have every right to complain. There are cases where, say for example, in media organizations like us in NDTV, we are strictly prohibited from asking for any personal favors from any of the officers we may come in touch with. We never do that. But we may call you. Say for example, there could be a case of an old mother who's found positive. There is no way to help them to get an ambulance to the hospital. Can you do that? You immediately call an officer. Things work because you're able to get some help for a needy case. Again, you're doing this as a journalist, not as a favor for your friend, family. No, but a professional journalist should never do that. But if any officer who feels that is beyond the realm of journalism, he or she should deny that, say no firmly, politely. So that is perfectly fine. And yes, I think there should be zero tolerance for that kind of unprofessional journalism, zero tolerance for manipulation, blackmail, whatever you call it. And there is provision both legally and through the organization to address all these things. Every channel has a publicly given email ID in terms of feedback, in terms of comments, and you should take firm action against those journalists who indulge, as you said, in such practices. And yes, as I told you, every organization worth its salt will take this seriously. There have been instances where journalists have been sacked for such behavior. Journalists have been removed, and they still remain jobless because once their credibility as a journalist is lost, nobody would want to hire them. So only when officials do that, then again it becomes a kind of a check, a deterrent for others to stop that kind of a practice. But yes, I understand there could be a small percentage of journalists who misuse this, who blackmail, who threaten, but there is no reason for journalists, for officers to entertain that, to be victimized, to fall prey. No, you have every right to address it, complain, even take legal action, going to the court.
Okay. Any interesting anecdote do you have with any civil servant?
I think I can talk to you about 2 or 3. This was in the year 2000, maybe 2003 or 4. There was a huge cyclone alert in Nagapattinam. I was based in Madurai. We didn't have internet. We didn't have satellite technology. We had to shoot our interviews on a tape and then send it by the flight from the nearest airport. So I reached Nagapattinam around 12 o'clock midnight. I called the collector. It was Mr. Shivadas Meena, who's still serving. I had no other way because he has to give me the interview now about the preparations. The early morning is going to hit. And my flight available in Tiruchi was around 9 o'clock. So I have to do that early morning shots I have to take, and then take the tape back to Trichy and apply. He took the call. It was past midnight. He understood my position. He said he'll come to the beach, the harbor at 6 o'clock early in the morning. So we went there early in the morning, took all the shots of the choppy sea, the trees all shaking, the boats, the movement in the boat of the boats because of the heavy wind. And he was there for an inspection. There we took those visuals. We took the interview. We rushed to the Trichy airport, and we were able to carry it for the evening news. Many such officers, the former chief electoral officer, I think his name is Sarangi, that's how do you call it? Debendranath Sarangi. If you're late to the airport, the Madurai airport's counter will close. Then you have to give your tape to a visitor, saying that my colleague, somebody will come from your office to collect it from you in Chennai, Penitik. So we've used many couriers, many officers as courier boys. Mr. Debendranath Sarangi, many collectors, they all have taken our tapes. And then there was one Rajendran, an senior IPS officer who is retired now. He was the IG of Madurai. So he was the IG of Southern Tamil Nadu, based in Madurai. That was the time when we had communal classes in Tirunelveli, and I had a story. And when I called him, he said, "Sam, I'm crossing almost Virudhunagar." And I said, "Sir, I have the tape in the flight in the afternoon. I'm somewhere in Madurai. How do we do that?" Without thinking, he said, "Sam, you take your car, come towards Virudhunagar. I'll come backwards." Midpoint, we met. We did the interview on the roadside, and about the security there, about measures, the root cause of the violence there. And I was able to still come back with the tape to Madurai airport and send the tape by flight. And then we had Mr. Radhakrishnan, the present health secretary. He was the collector of Sivaganga once. So we went there for a story in Sivaganga. Not many would know he's a veterinary doctor. And he was actually attending to the delivery of a cow. And we got some lovely visuals of the collector attending to the delivery of a cow in a small village there. I mean, these are stories where you get to see the other side of the officers, the humane side. They don't mind helping you, taking out the tape. They don't mind coming to you because you have to send the tape in the... Who would come? Which collector would answer a call at 12 in the night, come early morning to the harbor to speak to a journalist? I mean, there are hundreds of such stories which I can share, who trust you. Again, I would say, in the larger interest of democracy, in the larger interest of dissemination of truth, they go out of their way. And again, as you said, there have been times when poor students have been denied bank loans. I've asked the collectors to call, saying they've intervened immediately. There are, as I told you, a village without electricity. All those things happened because officials were proactive. They took these reports seriously, and they made sure whatever in their command could be used to bring relief to those communities. So I think such nice experiences we have had. And some officers, when we meet, they say on a light note, we all have grown together over the years. So that's a kind of a rapport when you are professional, when officers know you don't have any personal axe to grind, you tell the truth. Even if it's a critical story, they know that you will be fair in your reporting. Then I think they trust you. It's not difficult. Likewise, when officers come extra mile, do that extra walk, then we also know that they can be trusted. They also have their limitations. We understand the other side of the difficulties. And there is a good, I wouldn't say partners in crime, but we are able to discharge our responsibilities in a better way. We as journalists, you as civil servants, we all have a middle path to take, middle ground, besides the role of keeping the powers that be, or putting them for account, or to make them accountable, the larger purpose for which we and you, journalists and civil servants, are selected for this. I think we're able to do that function in a more meaningful way.
What is the last message you want to give? Because many who are seeing this, watching you now, will be joining service within a year or two and will be serving the nation in different capacities. A message for them, can you give, sir?
I think in my nutshell would be, the media or journalists are not your enemies. You can actually multiply, amplify your efforts by using the media in a very proactive way, in a very fair and transparent way, so that you as a civil servant would be able to do your job effectively. Even if it's a negative story, you're able to use that as an opportunity to correct that, to rectify that, to by using the powers under your command in every way. So I think that's the larger purpose. And I would say mainstream media's role is increasingly becoming less and less. Under your command, you have the social media, you have the technology to reach out even without using the platform, the media as a platform. I always say news makers have themselves become news breakers now. News makers of themselves become news breakers. If you use this technology effectively, I think our role will become very, very less. You yourself can actually do a great job. For example, many of our stories nowadays come from social media. What a collector, what an officer, what an IFS officer has posted. That gives us lots of ideas too. So if you're fair, transparent, sincere, and genuine in your approach, we can become partners, and you don't have to be scared at all. And as I told you, criticism, it can be a great opportunity to turn it to advantage.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your precious time. I know how much you squeezed out of your busy schedule for this particular session. Thanks a lot from on behalf of all the
Thank you very much for your
aspirants who
time.
are watching it.
Such
Thank
a joy
you, sir.
talking to you, and I wish all the best for all the aspirants who are watching this. Wish you all the best, and hoping to see you as collectors, SPs, police officers, and bureaucrats in the years to come. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.